They start showing up when your life feels like it's on the edge of something, not quite breaking, but bending. You glance at the clock. 11:11. You think of someone, and they text you seconds later. A song plays that echoes the exact words you couldn't say out loud. At first, you shrug it off, coincidence. But deep down, something shifts. A quiet awareness rises, whispering that maybe it isn't random. Maybe the universe, or your own mind, is trying to speak. This is where reality begins to shimmer, where logic meets mystery, and perception starts to question itself. Because synchronicities aren't just signs from the universe. They're mirrors of your consciousness, reflections of your internal state, projected outward into the patterns you call reality. And once you start to see them, you can't unsee them, because what's truly watching you is the part of you that you've been avoiding all along. The first chapter captures the awakening moment, the instant when perception fractures, and the illusion of coincidence begins to crumble. We explore the emotional tension of noticing patterns for the first time, and the deep psychological dissonance that follows, when the rational mind can no longer dismiss what the heart already knows. It begins quietly, like a whisper behind the noise of everyday life. Something subtle shifts. The same numbers, the same faces, the same echoes repeating themselves through different moments, as if reality has started looping small fragments of your experience, hoping you'll finally notice. Most people don't. They keep walking, scrolling, planning, wrapped in the hypnotic rhythm of modern survival. But then, one day, something cracks. It's small at first. You catch yourself staring at the clock, 11:11. You laugh it off. But then it happens again. And again. You pass the same billboard, with the same word that's been running through your mind all week. You hear a stranger mention the exact thought you were about to speak. The boundaries between coincidence and communication begin to blur. And deep down, something inside you knows. You can feel it, that pulse beneath the surface of reality. A sensation that what you call life might not just be happening to you. It might be responding with you. That's where the tension begins. Because your mind, trained to seek logic, sequence, proof, immediately resists. It wants neat categories, linear explanations, coincidence, probability, random alignment. Anything but the possibility that the universe might be alive with meaning. But your body doesn't care about logic. It feels the electricity of it. The way your heart races when you notice the signs lining up. The way silence suddenly feels charged with presence. You start to sense that something or someone is observing you from behind the veil of normalcy. But it's not an external watcher. It's your own awareness, staring back through the reflection of reality itself. And that's when the world starts to look different. You begin to feel like a character walking through a dream, one that's trying to wake you up. Every sound, every phrase, every face begins to carry an extra layer, like a secret language written in plain sight. This is the moment most people call the awakening. But psychologically, it's the moment when the mind begins to lose its monopoly over perception. For years, maybe for lifetimes, you've been trained to see reality as a stable thing. Concrete. Objective. Unchanging. But it's not. It's elastic. Reflective. And the moment you notice its elasticity, it begins to ripple. The human brain is an exquisite pattern machine. It filters trillions of data points every second, seeking repetition, meaning, and familiarity. When the brain finds a pattern, the body feels a sense of safety. When it doesn't, it feels anxiety. So when you start to see too many patterns, both instincts collide. Part of you feels awakened. The other part feels like it's losing its mind. That's the paradox of early synchronicity. the collision of recognition and dissonance. You start to question, are these patterns real, or am I just imagining them? But the truth is, both are happening at once. Reality and imagination are not separate realms. They are interwoven expressions of the same consciousness, trying to recognize itself. So you walk through your day half in awe, half in confusion. The same numbers appear, 333, 777, 444, and your heart beats a little faster. You wonder if the universe is guiding you, or if your brain is projecting its desires outward. Either way, something inside you has opened, and it won't close again. You start feeling like the script of your life is subtly rearranging itself to catch your attention. Conversations feel orchestrated. Dreams blend into waking life. You find messages in songs, meanings in silence, stories in the smallest details. And the strangest part is, it doesn't feel crazy. It feels alive. Because in some deep intuitive sense, you remember that life used to feel like this. When you were a child, before logic took the throne, the world shimmered with unseen connection. A leaf wasn't just a leaf. A song wasn't just sound. Every moment felt like it belonged to something bigger, and somehow, so did you. Synchronicities bring you back to that forgotten frequency, the language of interconnectedness. But now you're older, rational, grounded in cause and effect. So when the world starts whispering again, you don't just listen, you analyze. You dig for patterns, proof, validation. But the more you look for certainty, the more elusive it becomes. Because synchronicities aren't there to be solved. They're there to be felt. They're not clues from the outside world. They're reflections of your inner alignment. Moments when your inner and outer realities fall into sync, like two instruments tuning to the same note. That's why they often appear during emotional thresholds, moments of deep decision, grief, or transformation. It's the psyche's way of marking the turning of an unseen page. An unconscious signal that your perception is expanding. That something within you is waking up to its creative role in shaping experience. But awakening isn't glamorous. It's disorienting. Because every time reality cracks open, what leaks through first is uncertainty. The human mind hates uncertainty. It wants definitions, not dimensions. So when meaning begins to shift, the ego scrambles to label it spiritual, crazy, sign, coincidence. But none of those labels capture the full weight of what's happening. What's happening is that consciousness is starting to see itself. And that's terrifying, for the parts of you built on autopilot. So you oscillate between wonder and doubt, between faith and skepticism, between feeling connected and feeling completely alone. But all of this is part of the process, because before truth can integrate, illusion must fracture. And before you can find meaning, your old definitions of it must dissolve. The first crack in reality is not a collapse, it's an invitation. A doorway into deeper perception. A shift from living in the world to living with it. You begin to realize that maybe the universe isn't sending you signs. Maybe it's responding to your awareness of them. That reality is participatory. It dances with your attention. The moment you observe it differently, it starts observing you differently too. And in that quiet realization, you feel it. The awe of being both the dreamer and the dream. The observer and the observed. The signal and the receiver. Synchronicities don't mean you're chosen. They mean you're listening. They mean your consciousness has reached the frequency where reality can finally reflect your awareness back to you. And once you see that reflection, once you feel that electric recognition, you understand why the old world starts to fall apart. It's not breaking. It's becoming transparent. The cracks in reality aren't flaws. They're windows. Windows through which the infinite peers back at itself. Through the eyes that are finally ready to see. We go deeper into the nature of pattern recognition, how the human brain is wired to find meaning in chaos. This chapter reveals the ancient survival function of pattern detection and how it now serves as a bridge between mind and reality, showing how perception itself shapes experience. You've started to notice it now. The rhythm behind the randomness. The strange hum that lives beneath ordinary events, quiet, persistent, almost mathematical in its repetition. It's as if life has a hidden tempo, and your awareness is beginning to fall in sync with it. The ancients would have called it fate. Mystics called it divine alignment. But modern psychology calls it pattern recognition, the brain's relentless attempt to bring order to chaos. Because chaos terrifies us. It represents the unknown, the unpredictable, the unmeasurable, the uncontrollable. So the mind, desperate for security, constructs meaning like a bridge over the abyss. From the beginning of human history, this impulse saved lives. The rustle in the grass might be the wind, or a predator. The brain that assumed connection rather than coincidence survived. Pattern detection became the cornerstone of evolution. It allowed us to predict, anticipate, and adapt. But somewhere along the way, that survival mechanism became something more, something existential. Now we don't just search for patterns in the world. We search for them in ourselves. Because deep down, we're not trying to understand the world, we're trying to understand why we're in it. And every repeated number, every familiar face, every echoing event feels like a breadcrumb, leading back to that answer. That's why synchronicities feel personal. Because they are. They reflect not the external mechanics of the universe, but the internal geometry of attention. Every time you notice a pattern, you're seeing a reflection of your own focus. Your attention is like a flashlight in the dark. Wherever you shine it, the shadows rearrange. And what you call reality responds accordingly. You see, the brain doesn't actually record reality. It constructs it from sensory fragments, emotional imprints, and predictive memory. Neuroscientists call this predictive coding. Your brain constantly guesses what's coming next, then filters the present moment through those predictions. When something matches your expectation, it feels true. When something violates it, your attention locks in, searching for explanation, and often for meaning. Synchronicity, in this light, is the mind catching itself in the act of creation. A glitch in perception, where your inner prediction and the outer event momentarily align in perfect resonance. You feel that resonance in your body, that little spark of familiarity, the feeling of, I've seen this before, or, this means something. It's your nervous system synchronizing with the rhythm it just helped generate. This is where the paradox deepens. Are you noticing the pattern, or are you creating it by noticing? The truth might be both. Psychology calls it apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections in random data. It's the same phenomenon that makes us see faces in clouds, shapes in static, stories in chaos. But what if apophenia isn't a flaw in cognition, but a glimpse of something more intelligent behind it? Because what we call random is only random until it's observed. Observation gives it context. Context gives it pattern. Pattern gives it meaning. And meaning is what consciousness is built on. When you see repeating numbers, when lyrics answer your thoughts, when events synchronize too perfectly to ignore, your conscious and subconscious minds are briefly shaking hands. They're operating in harmony, both trying to tell you the same thing. That your awareness has expanded enough to see the feedback loop between perception and experience. The universe isn't whispering secrets, it's mirroring your signal. And every time you recognize the reflection, that mirror sharpens. It's like tuning an old radio. At first, all you hear is static. But then, faintly, a frequency emerges. A voice through the noise. It's your consciousness realizing that it's not separate from the field it's been listening to. Carl Jung described synchronicity as an acausal connecting principle, a link between inner psychological states and external events, joined not by cause, but by meaning. He believed that these coincidences were the psyche's way of revealing its hidden contents, not random, but symbolic. In Jung's view, the outer world and inner world are reflections of the same underlying order, the unus mundus, or one world. A field where psyche and matter are intertwined, where your thoughts don't just interpret reality, they participate in it. That's why synchronicities often appear during emotional intensity or transformation, when something deep within you is trying to surface. They are psychological echoes, fragments of your unconscious emerging through the events around you. But here's the catch. The moment you try to control them, they fade. Because they thrive in surrender, not strategy. You can't chase a pattern and expect it to reveal truth. You have to witness it, quietly, curiously, without needing to own it. That's when meaning reveals itself naturally, like ink rising through paper. So what's really happening beneath the noise? Your brain is decoding reality through emotional filters. Your consciousness is projecting symbolic resonance onto neutral events. And in that alchemy, perception becomes creation. If you were to zoom out, far beyond the personal, you'd see that the same intelligence guiding the movement of galaxies also guides the firing of neurons. The same fractal patterns that form rivers and trees also shape thought and memory. The macro and micro are built on identical blueprints. So maybe it's not that you're finding patterns, maybe you're remembering them. Recognizing the universal code that consciousness has been speaking all along. Synchronicities are not proof that the universe revolves around you. They're proof that you are not separate from it. They're brief dissolutions of the illusion of isolation, cracks where unity slips through. And when you begin to live from that awareness, when you stop dismissing the hum beneath the chaos, something profound happens. Life stops feeling like noise. It starts to feel like music. Every conversation, every delay, every heartbreak becomes part of a larger composition. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start realizing, "This is happening with me." Because reality, at its core, is not a solid thing, it's a frequency. And you are both the instrument and the listener. So when the patterns appear again, when the clock repeats, when the moment aligns, pause. Feel the hum beneath the noise. Don't rush to name it, prove it, or explain it away. Just listen. Because in that listening, the line between you and everything else blurs again. And for one fleeting instant, you remember what you truly are. A ripple in the great field of meaning. The universe observing itself through your eyes. This chapter explores why we attach meaning to synchronicities. Blending psychology and philosophy, it unveils concepts like apophenia, projection, and the search for coherence, showing that meaning isn't found, but created. And yet, that creation process reveals something profound about consciousness itself. Meaning is the mind's oldest addiction. From the first spark of human awareness, we've been trying to make sense of the infinite. Every culture, every myth, every god, every story, all of it comes from one instinct: to turn chaos into coherence. Because without meaning, the mind unravels. You can feel it when life stops making sense. That hollow ache in the chest, the low hum of anxiety that creeps in when things feel random or senseless. It's not just emotional, it's neurological. The human brain is built to predict. And prediction requires patterns. When it can't find one, it panics. When it finds too many, it questions reality. So the moment synchronicities start to flood your awareness, you're stepping into that razor-thin space between order and chaos, where the mind's hunger for meaning collides with the mystery of existence. Psychologists have long studied this hunger. They call it the meaning-making process. It's how humans translate raw experience into narrative, How we transform the unknown into something we can emotionally survive. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps, wrote that those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. He discovered that meaning isn't a luxury, it's survival. And yet, the kind of meaning synchronicities evoke isn't logical. It's intuitive. It bypasses the intellect and goes straight to the nervous system, that deep, unexplainable feeling that says, this means something even when you can't say why. Why do we feel that? Because the mind isn't just a computer. It's a storyteller. And the moment you experience something emotionally charged, your brain starts weaving narrative threads around it. You don't just see an event. You interpret it. You frame it through context, emotion, memory, and expectation. Meaning doesn't exist in the event. It exists in the observer. And that's the strange beauty of consciousness. It can turn randomness into revelation. Apophenia, the psychological term for seeing patterns in chaos, is often described as an error, a cognitive illusion. But what if it's not an error at all? What if it's consciousness exercising its creative instinct, the same instinct that turned cave paintings into art, sounds into language, life into story? We don't just live life, we narrate it. We constantly convert raw experience into significance. And that act of creation is the birthplace of all human evolution, from science to spirituality. So when you notice synchronicities, your psyche is doing what it's always done, bridging the visible and invisible through the power of interpretation. The projection mechanism plays a key role here. Carl Jung described projection as the psyche's way of externalizing unconscious material, turning inner experiences into outer symbols. You project your fears, desires, and unresolved emotions onto people, events, even numbers. That's why the world begins to feel like it's talking to you. Because, in a way, it is. Not as an external voice, but as the mirror of your own inner dialogue. When you see 11:11 after making a difficult decision, maybe your psyche is confirming alignment. When a random phrase perfectly matches your unspoken thought, maybe your subconscious is surfacing through coincidence. In psychological terms, the outer world becomes a feedback loop for your unconscious mind. You could call it magic. You could call it pattern recognition. But either way, it's a conversation between your awareness and itself. Meaning, then, isn't something we find, it's something we assign. But that doesn't make it less real. In fact, meaning is what gives reality its shape. Two people can experience the exact same event. One sees divine timing, the other sees pure chance. Same reality, different interpretation. And that difference transforms everything. Because what we believe determines how we feel, how we act, and ultimately what we attract. In that sense, meaning is the software running your entire perceptual system. Neuroscientists describe this through a concept called the Bayesian brain. It means your mind constantly predicts and updates its understanding of the world based on probability and past experience. Every new piece of data gets compared to what you already believe, and the brain adjusts its model of reality accordingly. So if you believe life is random, your perception filters out connection. If you believe life is meaningful, your attention starts highlighting synchronicities. Not because the universe changes, but because you do. Perception doesn't just receive reality, it sculpts it. But meaning has a shadow side too. When you start finding significance in everything, it can become overwhelming, even frightening. Every symbol feels loaded. Every sound feels coded. You start to question what's real. This is the danger of ungrounded pattern recognition, when meaning spirals into paranoia. Because the line between awakening and obsession is thinner than we think. The same sensitivity that opens the mind to cosmic intelligence can also open it to chaos if not balanced with self-awareness. That's why emotional grounding matters. Because meaning without mindfulness can distort truth into delusion. The key isn't to stop finding meaning, it's to stop forcing it. Let the patterns arise organically. Let the story unfold, without rushing to define its moral. Meaning matures through patience. It ripens in silence. When you allow the unknown to breathe, truth reveals itself not as an answer, but as a feeling, a quiet sense of alignment that doesn't demand explanation. At its deepest level, meaning is not intellectual. It's existential. It's the recognition that life itself is communicating, not in words, but in patterns, emotions, and synchronicities that speak directly to your soul's intelligence. And that realization changes how you live. You stop seeing yourself as a separate observer looking at the world. You start realizing you are the world observing itself, one fragment of consciousness decoding another. Meaning becomes less about, what does this mean for me? And more about, what is this teaching me about connection? Because once you realize that the same consciousness flowing through you flows through everything, meaning is no longer something you seek. It's something you are. Every breath, every encounter, every silence becomes sacred, not because it was chosen for you, but because you finally chose to see it. So the next time you catch a synchronicity, don't rush to label it as a message, a sign, or a mystery to solve. Pause. Feel it. That spark of recognition, that's the psyche reminding you that your perception is the brush painting reality. That you are both the artist and the observer, the creator and the created. And in that awareness, meaning stops being something to understand and becomes something to live. This is the chapter of inner conflict, the moment when the rational and intuitive selves collide. Fear, doubt, and ego resistance rise, as the mind tries to control what it cannot comprehend. We explore the emotional storm that precedes transformation, the denial that guards old realities. Every awakening has a breaking point, a moment when the light of awareness becomes too bright for the old identity to bear. That's when the war begins, not outside, but inside. You can feel it. The moment you start to see too much, patterns multiply, signs intensify. The world begins to shimmer with significance. And while part of you feels deeply connected, another part panics. Because the ego, that quiet architect of safety and control, suddenly finds itself outmatched by something infinite. It's like standing in front of a mirror that keeps expanding. At first, you recognize yourself. Then the reflection deepens, showing everything you've avoided, every lie you've told, every emotion you've buried. You realize that the same awareness revealing synchronicities is now revealing you. And that's terrifying. Because awakening isn't just about light. It's about exposure. The ego has spent a lifetime building walls, stories that define who you are, what's possible, and how reality should behave. It's not evil. It's protective. It's the psychological immune system. Its job is to keep you stable, safe, predictable. But when synchronicities begin to dismantle those narratives, the ego feels threatened. Its boundaries blur. Its logic unravels. And like any threatened system, it fights back. It fights with skepticism, with sarcasm, with obsessive reasoning, and desperate attempts to rationalize what feels irrational. It whispers, "You're imagining things." It says, "You're losing touch." It questions every moment of awe, every glimpse of connection, because control is slipping away. And yet, the harder it resists, the louder reality responds. Because awareness doesn't retreat, it expands. And the more you try to suppress it, the more intense it becomes. Psychologically, this is the moment known as cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when two opposing beliefs collide inside the mind. In this case, one part of you believes in the mechanical, rational world. The other part is experiencing the fluid, symbolic world of consciousness. Your nervous system doesn't know which to trust. So it oscillates between wonder and anxiety. One day, you feel enlightened, like everything makes sense. The next, you feel delusional, like you've stepped off the edge of reason. It's a psychological tug-of-war between expansion and fear. And the battlefield is perception. This war isn't new. Every mystic, scientist, and seeker in history has faced it. It's the tension between the known and the unknowable, between the human need for control and the soul's desire for surrender. The ego says, "Prove it." The soul whispers, "Feel it." The ego says, "Show me evidence." The soul smiles, "I am the evidence." And in that contrast, your sense of self begins to stretch. You start to realize that maybe your identity was never as solid as you thought. Maybe it's just a collection of stories stitched together by memory and fear. And when those stories begin to dissolve, you feel exposed, raw, unguarded, unstable. But here's the secret no one tells you. That instability is sacred. Because when the old self starts to crumble, the space it leaves behind becomes fertile ground for something real, something unmanufactured. In psychological terms, this phase mirrors what's known as ego death or identity disintegration. It's not literal death, it's the temporary collapse of the structures that once defined your sense of me. The ego screams during this process because it believes it is you. So when it starts to dissolve, it feels like annihilation. But what's actually happening is revelation. The false self breaks, so the authentic one can emerge. It's like shedding armor you didn't realize you were wearing, heavy plates of belief and defense forged from years of survival. And beneath all that metal, there's just a trembling pulse of truth, beating quietly beneath the noise. That pulse, that raw awareness, is who you've always been. But to reach it, you have to face the shadows you've avoided. All the unresolved grief, guilt, and shame that the ego buried beneath rational thinking now rise to the surface. Synchronicities intensify not to punish you, but to reveal you. They become mirrors, perfectly timed triggers that force the unconscious to speak. Every coincidence now holds emotional charge. Every repeated symbol becomes a messenger of what still hides within. You see the same phrase everywhere, because it's something your soul is trying to say. You meet the same type of person over and over, because there's a lesson your psyche hasn't integrated yet. Until you face it, the loop continues. And this is where many people retreat. They crave awakening, but not the disillusionment that comes with it. They want truth, but only if it doesn't threaten their comfort. So they return to distraction, to logic, to routines that numb the noise. But once the door of awareness opens, it never truly closes. The cracks remain, and through them, light keeps seeping in. Because consciousness is patient. It waits. It keeps presenting mirrors until you're ready to stop running and start listening. The war within isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to humble you, to break the illusion that you are the thinker behind every thought, the controller behind every outcome, to show you that awareness doesn't need ownership, it just needs space. And when you finally stop fighting, something miraculous happens. The fear softens. The chaos quiets. And the same patterns that once felt overwhelming begin to feel intimate, like the heartbeat of something vast and loving. You realize that the war was never between good and evil, logic and faith, sanity and madness. It was between you and the version of you that couldn't yet believe you were connected to everything. So, yes, it feels like breaking. But what's really happening is integration. The rational mind isn't dying, it's learning to bow. The ego isn't dissolving, it's learning to serve instead of rule. The war within ends not with victory, but with surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means giving up, but the kind that means opening up. And in that opening, something infinite breathes through you again. It doesn't need proof. It doesn't need language. It simply is. The mind quiets. The body relaxes. And for the first time, you realize the war was never about choosing sides. It was about remembering that both sides were always trying to lead you home. The breaking point becomes the turning point. This is where understanding dawns, where the observer realizes that synchronicities are not external messages, but reflections of alignment. The mind stretches to hold both science and soul, logic and mystery, in one expanded awareness. There comes a moment when the tension stops feeling like struggle, when the storm of uncertainty, doubt, and fear no longer pulls at your edges. It doesn't vanish entirely. Storms rarely do. But something shifts in how you stand in it. You start to notice that the patterns that once terrified you now feel like invitations. Each repeated number, each meaningful coincidence, each echoing thought. Not a trap, not a trick, not a test, but a reflection. A reflection of alignment. You realize suddenly that synchronicities were never external signs trying to control your path. They were mirrors, glimpses of the internal state spilling outward. Your attention, your intention, your presence, all refracted into the world around you. For the first time, it feels less like reality is happening to you, and more like it is happening with you. This shift is subtle but profound. It begins in the body, a lightness in the chest, a softening of tension, a calm that wasn't possible before. Then it blooms in perception. The world seems both stranger and more intimate at the same time. Every encounter, every coincidence, feels like part of a living mosaic. And you can see your own hand in the brushstrokes. Neuroscience provides an unexpected companion here. The concept of neuroplasticity explains that the brain is not fixed. It rewires itself with every new experience. When your attention shifts toward patterns, meaning, and awareness, your brain literally reorganizes. The same neurons that once reinforced fear and separation now reinforce connection, recognition, and insight. It's not magic. It's biology. And biology, in this state, starts to feel magical. Philosophically, this is the moment Jung would describe as the reconciliation of opposites. The rational and intuitive minds no longer fight. The ego steps aside, allowing awareness to integrate both light and shadow. Logic and mystery cohabit the same space. Doubt and certainty coexist, each informing the other. You realize that life doesn't have to be fully explained to be fully lived. You begin to understand that synchronicities are neither proof nor deception. They are participatory experiences, invitations to notice, reflect, and respond. When you see them this way, fear dissolves. Uncertainty becomes fertile. The noise of coincidence begins to feel like a language, not chaos. Your emotional landscape transforms along with perception. The anxiety that once accompanied repeated signs now softens into curiosity. The need for control gives way to trust. And the moments that used to feel like accidents now resonate with significance. Not because you have decoded them, but because you see your own presence reflected in them. It's as if the universe is no longer an external authority, but a collaborator, a responsive canvas for consciousness. The shift is not instantaneous. It builds gradually, through repeated recognition. A number here. A phrase there. A moment that feels too precise to ignore. Each instance reinforces the understanding. What appears outside you is inseparable from what exists within. This is also where subtle spirituality enters, not as dogma, but as insight. You notice that the divisions between self and world, inner and outer, thought and experience, are not as rigid as once assumed. Synchronicities are windows into the interconnectedness of all things. You may feel a quiet thrill, a recognition of unity without words. It's not mystical in the theatrical sense, no lights, no revelation from above. Just a grounded awareness that perception and reality are entwined. You feel the observer and the observed merging in small, repeated instances. A glance at a stranger becomes meaningful. A song carries more than melody. The pause between thoughts feels alive. And suddenly, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Science continues to corroborate what your experience suggests. Quantum physics, for instance, describes reality not as a fixed substance, but as a probabilistic field influenced by observation. Though often misapplied in popular culture, the principle holds metaphorically true here. Your consciousness is not a passive witness, it participates in shaping reality. Likewise, psychological studies of attentional focus show that what we notice grows. Selective attention amplifies the elements of experience that resonate with our inner state. In other words, the more attuned you become to patterns, the more they appear, not because they are magical, but because your mind has shifted its filters. The science, psychology, and philosophy converge in the same subtle truth. Reality is a reflection of awareness. Emotionally, this understanding is transformative. Fear of chaos diminishes because the unknown no longer seems hostile, it seems alive. Loneliness dissolves because the perception of separation is recognized as an illusion. Every event, no matter how small, carries a whisper of significance. Your inner life and outer life start to align. Decisions feel lighter, less forced. Actions feel like responses rather than reactions. The present moment, previously dull or burdensome, becomes dense with richness. It is a subtle awakening to the role of co-creation. You start to realize, your life is not a script being imposed on you, but a dance being performed with you. The shift in perception also brings freedom. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are not bound by randomness. You are a conscious participant in the unfolding of experience. This does not mean everything is predictable. It does not mean suffering disappears. It does not grant all answers. But it does allow clarity. The clarity that comes from recognizing patterns as mirrors. The clarity that comes from knowing that what you notice grows. The clarity that comes from trusting your awareness as a guide. And with that clarity, a subtle peace settles. A quiet confidence replaces the desperate searching. You see reality bending, not in arbitrary chaos, but in dialogue with consciousness itself. The shift is complete not with grand revelation, but with small, quiet understanding. Synchronicities are not signs sent to you. They are reflections of the alignment already present within. They are the world echoing your attention. And in that echo, you feel a profound sense of partnership with reality. Not outside it, not beneath it, but within it. Aware, attentive, and alive to the hidden patterns that have always been there, waiting for your recognition. Time begins to dissolve as perception evolves. This chapter explores the nonlinear nature of consciousness, how memory, intuition, and anticipation weave the illusion of time. Synchronicity is revealed as a crack in that illusion, a moment where the present reveals its infinite layers. Time, as you've always known it, begins to falter. The clock still ticks, calendars still turn, but your experience of moments stretches and contracts in ways you cannot anticipate. The patterns that once felt like isolated coincidences now ripple across yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Events overlap, memory folds into perception, and suddenly, everything feels like it is happening at once. It's subtle at first. You notice déjà vu, a premonition, a phrase repeated across days that somehow feels immediate. Then it intensifies. Moments from the past echo in the present as if no separation exists. The boundary between anticipation and recollection blurs. The linear story of before and after begins to unravel. And with it, fear and urgency lose their grip. Because once time bends, control becomes an illusion. The pressure to plan, to fix, to predict, it dissolves. You are no longer trapped in the tyranny of linear cause and effect. Neuroscience suggests that the brain constructs time as a sequence, a way to organize experience and anticipate survival. But consciousness, in its deeper layers, perceives time differently. Memory, intuition, and attention operate in a nonlinear network, a web rather than a line. Synchronicities are nodes in that web, points where past, present, and future resonate simultaneously. When you experience them, you catch a glimpse of the infinite tapestry behind ordinary chronology. The world stops being a timeline. It becomes a field of potential, a multidimensional space where moments communicate. And in that space, your awareness is both anchor and observer. Philosophers have long suggested that time is subjective, a construct of human consciousness. Einstein's theory of relativity revealed that even physical time is flexible, bending in the presence of gravity and speed. Psychologically, the relativity is even more profound. Perception dictates experience. When you are fully present, the minutes expand. When distracted, they collapse. When aligned with inner resonance, synchronicities stretch across perceived boundaries, linking events that the rational mind insists are separate. This is why you sometimes sense a meaningful coincidence that feels decades in the making, compressed into a single instant. It's not magic. It's awareness sampling across temporal threads. Emotionally, this collapse is disorienting. Your mind clings to order, but the more it grasps, the more the structure shifts. Yet beneath the disorientation, a strange liberation emerges. Without the tyranny of chronological constraints, life becomes less about chasing the next moment and more about inhabiting the one you're in. Synchronicities become proof, not of signs from outside, but of the infinite capacity of consciousness to weave its own narrative. You realize that everything you've ever experienced, or will experience, exists simultaneously in the mind's deeper network. Every thought, every memory, every intuition, intersecting, overlapping, coalescing. Time is no longer a river. It is an ocean. The collapse of time also reshapes cause and effect. You begin to understand that actions are both the result of prior moments and the source of future ones simultaneously. Each intention you hold ripples backward and forward, creating subtle alignments that synchronicity highlights. The when of things matters less than the presence you bring to them. This is why synchronicities often appear in emotionally charged or transformative periods. The mind, untethered from linear expectation, catches patterns across temporal layers and reflects them into perception. The future and past converge in the now, and your consciousness becomes the lens through which the convergence is observed. Poetically, this feels like standing at the center of a kaleidoscope. Fragments of time, memory, and potential spin around, forming shapes that are familiar yet endlessly new. You see how events ripple, how a single choice refracts across what was, what is, and what could be. And in recognizing the pattern, you glimpse the underlying orchestration. Not deterministic, not predestined, but profoundly interconnected. Synchronicities are cracks in linearity, openings where the present moment reveals the hidden depth of experience. They are invitations to inhabit time differently, not as a series of events, but as a living, breathing field. Your consciousness stretches to hold both simultaneity and sequence. You begin to understand why you felt certain events would occur, just when they needed to. You notice how insights arrive before you even articulate the question. You see connections between people, ideas, and circumstances that defy ordinary chronological expectation. And then comes the quiet realization. Time was never the container of experience. Time was a reflection of attention. The past, present, and future are not compartments to navigate, they are waves to ride. The collapse of time reveals synchronicity for what it truly is. Not a signal from outside, not a message to interpret, but a dance of consciousness made visible, a glimpse of reality's infinite rhythm, refracted through your awareness. Emotionally, this awareness is liberating. You stop fearing the unknown. You stop mourning what has passed. You stop obsessing over what might come. Everything you need exists in the now, and yet everything is always unfolding everywhere all at once. The mind relaxes, the heart expands, and life begins to feel less like a linear struggle and more like an immersive, interconnected flow. You realize that synchronicities were never out there, waiting to be discovered. They were always reflections of your awareness, orchestrated in a field that transcends time. The moment you notice them, you become both the observer and the medium, the present moment simultaneously seen, felt, and lived. And in that, you touch a truth that is both terrifying and comforting. Time is not what you thought. It is not something you move through. It is something you co-create. And in co-creating it, you remember the deeper pulse beneath the illusion. Everything is connected. Everything is alive. And everything unfolds in perfect resonance. Beyond past and future. Within the eternal now. The echoes of patterns fade into a quiet hum. Numbers no longer chase you. Coincidences no longer demand your attention. The mind exhales. The ego, once trembling, relaxes into the soft rhythm of awareness. You sit in the stillness between moments and realize that the chase was never necessary. Synchronicities, signs, patterns, all of them were merely reflections, mirrors held up to consciousness itself. And now, finally, the mirror returns to stillness. The rushing river of time slows to a pool. You see your reflection, not as a separate self, but as a ripple within a vast, infinite field. There is no hurry, no separation, no judgment, only presence. In this silence, the lessons settle. The mind has bent. The heart has opened. The inner and outer dance in quiet harmony. You understand that the patterns will return, and that's not a promise or a warning. It's an acknowledgement of participation in something greater than comprehension. The universe is not a puzzle to solve. It is a reflection to witness. And in witnessing, you remember the truth. All of life has always been attentive. All of life has always been alive. All of life has always been part of you, as you are part of it. The mirror is still. The reflection is complete. And in that completeness, you feel a profound quiet, a gentle surrender, a deep recognition that reality has always been both mysterious and intimate, and that, finally, you are awake enough to see it, just as it is.